In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, Alsace, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the setting for one of the most baffling mass events in European history. It began not as an uprising or disaster, but, as many of the best parties do, with a single woman stepping into the street and beginning to dance. Strasbourg is a city in northeastern modern-day France, sitting next to the Rhine River, and, as many European cities did, began as a Roman army camp way back in 12 BC. For hundreds of years in its early history, Strasbourg was governed by the bishops of Strasbourg. That makes more sense than being governed by the street sweepers of Stockholm or the canal cleaners of Amsterdam. Eventually, the citizens had had enough of episcopal authority, rebelled against their oppressors, and fought a successful battle known as the Battle of Hausbergen on March 8, 1262. The bourgeoisie gained control of politics and commerce, and Strasbourg became a free imperial city within the Holy Roman Empire. Had the bishops been slightly better at strategy, they would have enlisted Sister Mary Stigmata, or the Penguin, from the Blues Brothers, and almost certainly would have retained control of the city. At the time, Strasbourg was a prosperous city under immense strain. Poor harvests, recurring disease, and economic pressure had left much of the population malnourished and anxious. Life for the lower classes was precarious, and fear, both spiritual and physical, was a constant companion. Wait, am I describing the early Renaissance period of Europe, or modern life in the United States? They're nearly indistinguishable. According to contemporary records, a woman known as Frau Trophia began dancing in public without music, accompaniment, or any apparent reason. She did not stop after an hour, or a day. She continued for days, seemingly unable to rest, eat, or recover. Within a week, dozens had joined her. By the end of the month, the number had grown into the hundreds. City officials, physicians, and clergy debated the cause. Some blamed spiritual possession. Others suggested an excess of bodily heat, a medical explanation grounded in the humoral theory of the time. Their solution, unfortunately, was not to stop the dancing, but to encourage it. What? No leeches or bloodletting? No drilling holes in their skulls to release the evil spirits? Amateurs. At least give them all enemas, for fuck's sake. A wooden stage was erected. I said erected. Musicians were hired. Professional dancers were brought in to help the afflicted dance it out. The assumption was that the continued movement would purge the condition from their bodies. It did not. Apparently, creating the world's first Studio 54 wasn't the cure they had hoped it would be. Weird. Many participants danced for days on end, collapsing only to rise and continue. The original 24-hour party people. Contemporary accounts describe exhaustion, dehydration, and heart failure. Deaths were reported, not dramatic, but quietly inevitable, brought on by sheer physical collapse in the heat of summer. So it was basically Burning Man, without the drugs, STDs, and excessively long porta-potty lines. Eventually, the authorities reversed course. The dancers were removed from the city center and taken to a nearby shrine, where they were prayed over and forced into rest. Gradually, the dancing stopped. As abruptly as it had begun, the plague ended. I have always found that it's a good idea to stop whatever I'm doing and leave whenever someone tells me that they're praying for me. The aftermath left more questions than answers. No single explanation has ever been confirmed. Modern theories range from mass psychogenic illness to extreme stress reactions, to ergot poisoning from contaminated grain. None fully account for the scale or intensity of the event. What remains is the contrast. A city responding to suffering with music, a medical system treating exhaustion with exertion, and an episode where the attempt to help only deepened the harm. Socrates would have been so disappointed. Superstition almost certainly played a role, and it is very much in line with how people in 1518 would have understood the event. To people living in early 16th century Europe, unexplained physical behavior was rarely interpreted as random or psychological. It was interpreted as meaningful and usually moral. I assume they hadn't heard of Tourette's syndrome. In Strasbourg at the time, suffering was widely seen as a form of divine communication. Poor harvests, outbreaks of disease, and sudden illness were not accidents of nature. They were warnings. When something went wrong on a large scale, the assumption was not, what caused this, but what did we do to deserve this? A major part of that worldview involved saintly curses, particularly the belief that certain saints could punish or cure specific ailments. One of the most important figures in this context was Saint Vitus, who had been long associated with involuntary movement disorders. Saint Vitus's dance was already a known term for trembling, convulsions, or spasmodic movement centuries before 1518. People believed that Saint Vitus could afflict communities that had angered him through sin, moral laxity, or neglect of proper devotion. Crucially, his punishment was thought to be collective. One person's behavior could bring consequences upon many. That belief alone explains why the dancing spread rather than stopping. Once it began, fear of the curse made people hyper-attentive to every twitch or stumble. This fear created a powerful feedback loop. If someone believed they were cursed, resisting the symptoms might seem pointless or even dangerous. Giving in, paradoxically, felt safer. The dancing then became a kind of public confession, a visible sign that one acknowledged guilt and divine authority. City leaders and physicians were not immune to this thinking. Even when they adopted medical explanations, those explanations existed alongside religious belief, not in opposition to it. Encouraging the dancers to continue moving was not seen as negligence. It was an attempt to comply with what they had believed were spiritual rules governing the illness. Only when the response shifted to pilgrimage, prayer, and ritual penance, actions that addressed moral causation rather than physical symptoms, did the outbreak subside. To a modern observer, this looks irrational. To a 16th century audience, it was a logical correction. The fear of divine punishment was not a fringe belief or a metaphorical explanation. It was the default framework through which the event was understood. The dancing plague wasn't just a physical phenomenon. It was a moral crisis unfolding in public, one step at a time. Today, the idea of famine and illness being created by divine beings due to our transgressions is obviously absurd. But bear in mind, some 500 years after the dancing plague, in a world with space stations, semi-autonomous cars, artificial intelligence, and gene editing, there are still people who believe that catastrophic weather events are caused by the existence of homosexuality. Let that sink in. The dancing plague of 1518 reminds us that history's strangest outcomes often emerge not from malice, but from fear, misunderstanding, and misplaced certainty. Faced with the inexplicable, people acted with the tools and beliefs they had, and paid the price for it. These moments linger not because they shock, but because they unsettle our confidence in rational progress. If history teaches anything, it's that unpredictability is one of its most consistent features.